Secretary of State Dennis Richardson, his life came to a close here on earth. And I know that people will talk about Richardson a bit today when we wrap up our proceedings, but I jumped at the to take advantage of the bad weather and slide into a spot and steal this spot up here to talk and share with you about some of my interactions with a man that I believe was great, and to me he was a very beloved mentor. I have to tell you, and confess to you that the first time I met in person Dennis Richardson, he actually disclaimed me. And I believe it was McLean had set up, I had announced that I was going to run for his seat as he was running for governor and would not be filling it anymore. And so McLean set up this meeting for him and I to meet in between sessions where he was speaking to this group of loggers in Grants Pass. And so I decided I wanted to hear him speak, and so I show up early, and it just so happens that we pull into the parking lot at the same time, and we walk into the building next to each other, and this is the first time I've ever physically met him. And so we walk in just in time. He was a very prompt man, so we walk in just in time. They introduce him, and the person introducing him says, "And we see that you brought your replacement." And he says, "Whoa, wait a minute, I don't even know this guy yet." So we then spent the next couple hours chit-chatting, and he asked me all sorts of questions about life. He asked me about my family. He asked me about my values. He asked me about my politics. And it was interesting, about an hour into the conversation, he stands up and very formally sticks out his hand and says, and shakes my hand and says, "I want to see you replace me." And that started a whole new journey for me. And then he sat down and he gave me lessons in life. And what was interesting is the lessons weren't about necessarily how to be a politician, but how to be a man and how to be someone of honor. And one of the big things that he pointed out, he says to me, you can spend your entire life building your reputation, and you can destroy it in 1 minute. Never forget that. And as a public servant, you are always under the microscope, and it only takes one mistake, and your entire public life is over. So don't make that mistake. And he encouraged me. So lo and behold, he decided I needed to learn what I was doing if I was going to replace him. So he hired me onto his staff as he was running for governor. This was one of the most exhausting experiences of my life. Okay, this man got up at 5 a.m., and he would feed me this, because oftentimes he let me camp out on his couch. He was very fiscally sound that way. And he would let me sleep on his couch a couple nights a week as I worked for him. And in the mornings, he'd get up at 5 o'clock, and you kind of have to if your boss is getting up at 5 o'clock and you're sleeping on his couch. But he would wake me by the sound of his blender and serve me the most awful tasting smoothie I've ever tasted in my life. It was like a mixture of sunflower seeds, kelp, and mud. And he would give me this, it would be like this big. And he expected me to drink this whole thing, and I would, because I wanted to have the energy that he had. And then we would go about business, and I would follow him around all day long until about midnight when we would wrap up the day. And I remember the first time sitting down in his office, and I told him I was interested in budget things, and I thought I was good with numbers. And so he walks over, and he says, "Okay, we'll read this weekend. Make highlights and notes, and then ask me about it on Monday." And he sets it down in front of me. And he wasn't joking. This is how serious he took his job. He cared so much. I remember, after I got elected, he said he understood that being a little bit younger than him, that I might have different technology needs. So he let me use his supplies and services, because he prided himself on making sure he didn't overspend his own office budget. He wanted to give back more to the state than anybody else when it came to office budget. He wanted to show that he could do it on less. And so he told me he would go ahead and let me order whatever I needed as far as technology. And I wasn't paying that close of attention. And my staff at the time ordered a mouse for the computer that was much more expensive than I would have thought. And no joke, he called me, he's like, "Really? Why isn't this other one okay?" And he actually asked me to change the order. This is a man who cared about every single penny that taxpayers put in. He lectured me time and time again, not just to focus on state dollars, but even on federal dollars, because that's the taxpayer's dollar as well. He cared about all of this. His energy was amazing. But I have to tell you that for me, the greatness of Dennis Richardson was not about his achievements in public life. What made me admire him so much and want to replicate him in so many areas of my life was who he was as a person. His character is what just was so astounding to me. And what most people didn't realize is that we would end, when I would work for him, every night we had different faiths, and we would talk about those faiths, but nonetheless, we ended every single day at his little apartment that he had here, and he had this little footrest, and we would sit down at this footrest, and we would hold hands on the opposite side of this footrest, and we would end the day in prayer. And I want you to know some of the things he would pray about. He would pray about political peace. Despite the fact that, in my knowledge, he's one of the most fierce political warriors that the Democrats have faced. I think you can give credit to that. Okay, but he would pray for political peace. He would pray for wisdom to know what was best for Oregon. He would pray for courage, that he would honor God in all of that he did. And of all things, of all people, he would pray for sustained energy. And then he would spend some time and he would start praying for you guys, most of the time by name. And what impressed me wasn't just a generic, this person or help this person. He actually knew specific things about individuals' lives, and he held those up in prayer. And so in honor of him today, I want to take a moment and pray. And I want to pray a prayer that somewhat reflects the type of prayers that we would share. And I would love if you join me in that. God, we thank you so much that we live in a state where different political voices can be heard. And God, we ask for peace in that process, respect in that process. We ask that you would give us courage to always stand for the things that we value, that we would always fight for what we believe is right and what we believe would honor you. God, we ask that you would sustain us in this building as it gets tiring sometimes, and that you would sustain our families as it's hard on them as we do this work. But God, I ask that you would, above all else, that you would hold the relationships here close, that we would never forget the importance of one another in this building and the importance of those relationships as we go about conducting business that we want to honor you. And so, God, we ask these things according to your will and in your name. Amen. Thank you.